place is nice.
That's what exactly like me and my friend yesterday were talking about, just because everyone is kind of like, we all graduated together like a year or so apart, and he's in New York. So when he came back, he was like, so everyone's apartment, he was like, man, everyone's doing like really, really well. Like
This is
this
grown
is,
up. It's
yeah,
like, and you always were an adult ever since I've known you, but it's like,
try to be.
wow, like you could have people over.
Yeah, we can have people over. We like to host a decent amount too, so that's nice. It's much easier too, because if you want to like do anything, we're just like a block or two away from like the Pfizer Forum or just like that downtown area, so that's pretty sweet as well. It's much better than, because Matt still lives in the Bartlett house, and we always used to go over there, and it's like, oh, okay, now we got to get an Uber down there, and then we got to find another Uber to get all the way downtown, and then, well, crap, I live in Shorewood, so then I got to Uber all the way back to Shorewood. Now I have like a walk or hop on a little scooter.
Or bike ride.
Or bike ride.
Oh, the hop. That's right. You get the hop now.
Yeah, I actually haven't been on it. I've seen it a few times, though. I've seen it a few times. I mean, I don't know. What people say, it's a waste of money. I feel like it's...
I have
In the
reserved my
wintertime, we'll see.
judgment. If it gets more people using public transportation, it'll be worth it.
Yeah, I agree with that.
It cleans up traffic, makes our city more of a walking city, which is a friendlier city. So and 100 years ago, that's what we had.
Yeah.
And then cars came in and they ripped up all the tracks. So I think if we give, in Europe, when you go to Europe sometime, you'll see I think they have a pretty good balance of that.
Okay. I don't think we were just over there. We didn't see... It was just kind of crazy. Everything we were over in Paris for a few weeks, or like a week and a half, and everything was just under construction.
Paris is huge.
Yeah, that place. And we didn't even get to see everything, and we were there for 12 days.
Be a nice place for a honeymoon.
Yeah, we already did that, unfortunately. That was like our engagement trip.
Oh.
Not our honeymoon, but our engagement trip.
It's like you already did that.
Yeah, no, I think we booked the Paris trip before we got engaged.
Okay.
We booked it in like November, and we got engaged in February, and we did that in June. So worked out really well. It was a nice little trip. I enjoyed myself a lot.
Well, like I said, you deserve it.
Thank you. I appreciate it. There we go. All right, so 2 minutes in, and we're live. We are with Aaron Boyd. I've known this man for a decent amount, almost 9 years, 8 or 9 years.
You can say a decade now.
Pretty much a decade, yeah. Artist, illustrator, and just overall an amazing human being, honestly.
I'm learning to say thank you. So often in our lives, we get compliments, and I think it's part of our culture that you refuse something. If somebody offers you something, you say, "Oh no, thank you." Even if you're thirsty, say, "Oh
Yeah.
no, thank you." And there's one of my best friends. He's Buddhist, and he's like, you have to learn to accept. And that means
Yeah.
the good in yourself too. So when people say compliments, it is, you're supposed to rebuff it. But no, thank you very much. I do appreciate that compliment.
Awesome. Okay, so I kind of get that too, because a lot of times it's just like, right when someone gives me a compliment, I'm like, oh yeah, no. You always want to point the bad within yourself instead of just accepting it. And that's one thing I've actually been working on as well.
And that's separate from ego. Ego is, you know when it's ego, when someone is like, oh yeah, I'm the best. But, accepting the good in yourself and being honest.
It's key.
It not only makes your life better, it makes others' lives better around too.
It makes it feel as if like when you're giving someone a compliment and someone just kind of refutes it, it's not an empty compliment.
Yeah, it's the same as somebody hands you a gift.
Yeah.
And you say, no, thank you.
Yeah, like, you're not going to say no thank you if someone hands you a gift whatsoever. It's like you're going to work for 40 hours a week and they give you a paycheck and you're just like, no, I'm good. I enjoy being here. This is fine.
Apple, I want you to keep the check.
Yeah, just keep it. It's all right. So I don't think I did that intro justice. Tell us just a little bit about yourself. What all?
Well, I am a believer that deep down we're all artists. Human beings are artists by nature, I believe. And it doesn't matter what your medium is. If you're an athlete, that's an art form. If you're in medicine, that's an art. So, of course, music and dance and everything else, because you're expressing yourself. You're expressing your true self. If that is who you're meant to be and who you know inside, and I think we all have an idea of that voice inside of us of who we want to be, whether or not we follow it. When you're following that, I think that is your art. And I was very fortunate when I was a little kid. when I speak to schools, and this is a true line, and this is what I always start with. When I was 5, I knew I wanted to do this. There was something magical about color and shapes, and memory stuck with me faster if there was like a bright color involved, and so it really resonated with me. And by the time I was 6 and I started looking at children's books, I was like, that's it. That's what I want to do with my life. No doubts. I was very fortunate to go to a really good high school. And what was amazing to me is that my grades were not impressive. I was what you call an underachiever. But the kids around me were all getting straight A's. They were all going to go to Madison, whatever school they wanted to. But most of them didn't have any idea what they wanted to major in. And that was mind-blowing to me. It's like, how do you not know what you can do anything? How do you not know what you want to do? There's no economic hesitations. You can go to any school you want. But like I said, I do think that we do all have a calling. And I do identify myself first and foremost, before even a man or an American or whatever, as an artist.
Okay.
And I think it's a really healthy way to go through life because you're always critiquing, you're always weighing. You don't necessarily go with your first thought on things. I'm a huge believer in it's an old parable, the Good Samaritan. It's a gentleman is going from one town to another, and the Samaritans are the worst of the worst. They're whatever the bad guys are today. They're the bad guys. And this man hits hard times while he's on this journey, and every other noble tribe walks past him, leaves him on the roadside, and then he sees a Samaritan coming, and he's like, oh, this is it. I'm dead. The Samaritan's coming. And the Samaritan was the only one who stopped and helped him up, fed him, and got him to his destination. And I think when we are in touch with that creative side of ourselves, we're being more honest.
Okay.
And, that's the way I try to live my life.
That makes a lot of sense. You kind of like answered the 2 questions that I had right off the bat, but that works pretty well for me. So you said you knew this was something that you wanted to do pretty much your entire life. At that time, did you realize this was like a talent of yours as well? Or was it something that you wanted to do and that you just kept working to improve your skill?
Well, when you love something, I know whether or not you still consider yourself an athlete, you're an athlete.
Try to be.
When you're talking about that workout you do and like how you break that sweat and every day, most people would look at that as a mountain and go like, oh, every day, like, that workout would be like, I'm not climbing. Oh, I don't have the strength to do that. I remember yesterday I really kicked my butt. But for you, it's, it energizes you.
I agree.
And so
I love that pain.
So,
I love
yeah.
like that feeling of like pushing yourself to like the point where you're going to like, we call it death. Like, but it's like not to the point where you pass out, but to the point where your body's like shutting down and you just want to quit. Like I live by like one saying because of that is your body will fail you, your mind will not.
Yes. Oh, yeah. That's you. Of course, this is cliche to say, but your mind is such a powerful tool. Your muscles and everything else are almost secondary. I mean, your muscles, that's not you. I have one of my best friends who went into the Marines. And I asked him years later, I was like, would you do it again? He's like, he did it to test himself. And he was really proud that he did it. And he said, I wouldn't do it again. But he said that was one of his greatest lessons. All these things you think that you can't do, it, was all in your mind. And your attitude, it's as cliche as it is, your attitude is everything. You know a little bit about my life over the last couple of years. My spouse of 23 years passed away, and from one day to the next, everything in my life was turned upside down. And as painful as that had been, and it's still painful, one of the most beautiful things in my life came out of that. And it started like a little trickle, like a stream. I went down to the porch one day, and there was a cup of my favorite drink from Starbucks. Because once the neighborhood found out, and it was just like a little heart on it and said, "We love you."
That's awesome.
And the next day, a casserole showed up on the porch. And when people are reaching out to you, and you're not even asking for it, I think that that kind of a gift, that really says something about our true nature. That even in the darkest moments, the love of others will rise up. If you give that out there, of course, it'll rise up. So no, my attitude, though it was very painful, my attitude, I never was in a place where I lost hope.
That's a good thing.
Because, you know, and again, in racing or whatever else, it was something I used to always tell Jan is that pain is not like the Olympics. You don't train for it and it comes every 4 years. You're always training for it, but you don't know when it comes. And often when it comes when you're at your weakest. I'm sure you had track meets where you had a hammy or something like that.
I had a whole entire year like that. Like I had a whole year where it's like the year before I won conference, I was the top dog for everything. And the following year, which was my last year too, my last year running at the collegiate level, I barely made the final in the 100. I didn't make the final in the 200. It just happens.
And in my opinion, I find that the most beautiful moments aren't the moments where we're at our peak health and our peak perfection and we get, you know, we run a 9.5. Is that a good time? I forget. I've been out.
Oh, that's really that's
the world
that's a
record.
really good time. World record's 9.58. But
okay, so that's incredible.
Yeah.
But it's like my favorite Olympic moment ever. I forget the guy's name. He was from the UK. It was either the 100 or the 200. But the second he started the race, you saw it. He pulled something.
Oh, the 400-meter guy. Yep.
And he was crying, and he kept trying to get back up, and he couldn't do it, and the race was long over. And the guy's dad came out, and he put his son's arm over his shoulder, and he walked him like across the finish line. That is more potent to me than anyone winning the gold ever, because that's the moment that sticks with me. It's when things are at their hardest and you do your best. I think that those are the most beautiful moments.
I agree. You can't stop what you're doing. You can't quit. You have to keep pushing through, because pressure makes diamonds. And that's super cliche to say. But for me in my situation, like that was the hardest year of my life in track and field ever. But you know what? I didn't stop training. Everyone's like, oh, take 6 weeks off. I took a week. I kept pushing. I made my workouts harder than what they were before. I changed a lot of things like within my diet and, you know, et cetera, et cetera. But then the following year, I ran some of the fastest times I've ever ran in my entire life.
Well, and not to mention, it's the character that develops.
Yes.
It's like I said, it's easy to run those races when everything is going well.
Yep.
But that guy that, you know, I'm a big fan of boxing. When Muhammad Ali lost his championship and he came back and he lost his first challenge, and then when he was going to challenge again for the title, it was some guy even bigger, younger, faster, and there's no way he could win it. But, you know, despite those two previous losses, he showed up and he won. Again, I would argue, even if he didn't physically win the fight, that you can get back up.
Yep.
That character that develops is like a muscle. Just like, you know, when you have a sore workout, you know, sometimes life will kick your butt.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and you can't pause it. You can only decide how you react to it.
I agree.
And, you know, I think that, like, sports is a perfect metaphor for that.
That's awesome. That's really good to hear. I mean, a lot of people don't have that same mindset. People just kind of like, you know, you get knocked down, they're just like, oh, this sucks. Well, let me just give up or try something new. You have to continue.
The irony in that, I think, from my own experiences, is that it's easier to give up, it feels like. Mm-hmm. But the irony is that I think long term, it costs you more.
I agree.
It's not easier in the end.
Nope.
You lose so much more when you don't get back up. You know, like I said, when I spoke with the event that I went through with my loss, it's I wasn't ready for it emotionally. I wasn't ready for it physically. But I remember sitting and meditating on it. This was a piece of advice my dad gave me when I was a little boy, and it's funny that it traveled to me 40 years later. In that moment, and he asked me, do you know what to do when you don't know what to do? And I was like 5 or 6, and I thought about it, and it's like, well, well, I guess not. If I don't know what to do, then I don't know what to do. And he's like, there's going to be a time when I'm not around. And when that time comes, you can do this little trick, and it'll tell you what to do. And he said, you just sit and you listen really quietly. And you sit and you wait and you listen. And eventually a voice will come to you. And that voice will always give you the most honest advice. And he had me sit down as a little kid and just sit and just listen. And of course, at 5, that was a miracle to me that, you know, oh, wait, there is a voice in my head. And I remember asking him, can you hear it? And he's like, nope. He said, that's yours. And that's the voice that you listen to when you don't know what to do. And here I was, in my 40s. And though I've given that advice to other people, I sat down and I did it for myself. And the question was essentially that: give up or don't give up. And the feeling of sickness, weakness, and pain grew so much more from doing nothing, from surrender. The initial feeling of like not fighting was relief, like, oh, I don't have to fight it. But then within a few seconds of that, I felt it building up inside, like, no,
something's not right.
It's not right, and it's not going to be easier. We're built to get up again. And like I said, victory isn't measured in dollars and time and anything else. It's that guy that just can keep getting back up and getting back up. And I think if you do that for yourself, you're putting that out into the world as well. And, it's my firm belief that every time I illustrate a book, I'm thinking that I'm laying a brick forward for that next generation. What am I putting out there with a story that's good, that some kid in some other part of the world or in another generation is going to pick this up and learn how to read from? That's timeless.
That is. That was honestly one of the next questions I wanted to ask you. Was just, no, it's good. It works well for me. Like, how important do you think children's books are for today's youth as they grow? Books are becoming, not less and less common, but they're getting pushed to the side more and more. So kids are on, iPads or Android tablets and, not really connecting.
Yeah. I always say, I think the most noble job in the world is that of a teacher. And we're all a teacher in some way, in some function of what we do. And books are often, at least traditionally, books had been the medium for teaching. I know for myself I'm biased because I know that when I pick up a book, I love the smell of the paper, the feel of the paper, and, the images on the page. You don't need an outlet, it's always there for you. I would say that I'm concerned, but at the same time, I think, change is a natural part of life. And there are some changes that are not for the better. But I think as human beings, we find that balance eventually. Yeah. We may even fight the balance because it seems easier one way or not. But I guess I could share this now. I haven't shared this with you guys. So as you know, I mentioned when you knew about my spouse passing away. I remarried this year.
Know. Awesome.
And
Hold
again,
on, one second.
Sure.
No, not that. Oh, they're all changed now. Never mind. There's a round of applause on there, and it was the orange button yesterday.
They laughed because someone was foolish enough to marry me.
We'll get that part out and edit it. I'll find the applause.
No, leave that in. That's the best part.
I swear, I was like, there we go. Round of applause.
But so much as I was saying, there are things that I know in my heart and I know in my core are true. And one of the lessons for myself in particular that I've had to learn over the last year or two was actually being sure that I practice my own personal beliefs. And as I said, I recently remarried, and we're expecting our first child.
Congrats.
And so I know that I've already had that nightmare thought of, oh God, the iPad. I never. Oh, the phone. It's like, because once I remember my brother telling me, he's like, he just showed his son like some game on the iPad, And I think this is before his kid was really even speaking.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, what's the harm? The next day, the kid had figured out how to open the game back up on the iPad. And I was like, oh, geez. Now I'm gonna delay that as long as possible. But at the
Yeah.
same time, it is a tool, and there's nothing wrong with that tool. But I think that when you're growing and you're developing, I think it is human nature, or best for human nature, when you're in the world, when you're looking at the trees, you're talking to someone directly across from you. And then those times where you can't, and you have a friend who lives in London, and you want to, FaceTime them or something. That's wonderful. But technology, my only concern is when it comes at the expense of human contact. When the iPad, the amount of friends you have on Facebook becomes more important than the two friends in the room with you. And it's not that those aren't valuable people on Facebook, but it can create, I think, a false sense of reality. Yes, I have many, I should say that any of my friends on Facebook hearing this, you're all my friends. But it's important to be present, and it's important to be present with those around you. And even if no one's around you, the environment around you. And that is my concern with technology. The instant gratification, what's the population of, Dubai, and, and it tells you in 2 seconds, as opposed to exercising that muscle inside yourself, to dig it up and research it. And because it's true with exercising, you get more of a workout when at least I found when I did work out. I don't work out like you do, but when I was playing football, I felt the workout more than when I just lifted straight weights, because it's a natural movement. You're flowing, you're catching, you're running, you're jumping. Every game is different. Every play is different. If you're just lifting weights, you've seen those guys where they have the big torsos and no legs.
Yep. It's like you're super strong, but you're not athletic. You can't move.
Yeah. Again, it's strong, but it's not the balance. And again, I think we're at our best when we're balanced.
I agree. One thing that I've personally been working on is being more connected with what's going on around me. Like, I get called out all the time for just sitting and being on my phone. Like, yeah, I'll get to a place, I'll ask a few questions, have a conversation, but then after that, I'm just like, what's going on Instagram? I'm scrolling to scroll. I'm just like looking to
and it's
look
subconscious.
At other people's
You don't even realize you're doing it.
Don't even notice it.
Yeah. It's I know my father, God rest his soul. I told him there were two small lies I told him before he died. One was that I had asthma, and I told him that I had asthma because it was the only way I could get him not to smoke in front of me.
Okay.
And I knew that he loved me more than anything. And that would be the only thing that would stop him from smoking in my presence, would be that if he thought it hurt me. And it would, I don't think more than 30 seconds to a minute could go by where he wouldn't automatically just go for that cigarette. And as soon as it would hit his lips, he would go, oh, right. He'd put it away.
That's awesome.
But it is. And you're not, and again, I love Instagram. I think it's a great way to connect with people all over the world, see what other artists are doing. But again, how many times are we on there, and are we truly finding that nugget of information? Like, wow,
99% of the
time Kanye got a new hat. It's, no, it's the same hat. It's just on backwards. So it's. Yep. But that was one of the. I feel, and it's one of my deepest held beliefs. As I spoke to you about, we're all teachers. And even when people are gone, they're like a book in your library. They're still there. They're still accessible. You can still reach back and talk to your dad, or talk to, a pet, or talk to a friend. And I know that that's been one of my things with social media, is that when my wife and I are having dinner or something like that, I have a rule, and that is the phone's not at the table. Because it becomes like another person. Even if it's not on, you're looking, there's a temptation to look at it, or it does ring, or you can update. And at least for that half hour that we're eating, the phone's not present.
Makes sense. It's like you're itching. It's like, oh, You know, did someone like my photo? Oh, did someone comment on like my Facebook wall?
Yeah.
Did someone do this? Did someone retweet something? Instead of like being present and spending time with the people that you love or care about.
And imagine this. Imagine you're with someone you love very much, and not maliciously, like you said, we all do it. You're talking to this person, and in the middle of you talking to them, maybe you're talking about something really important that happened in your day, and they get an update, and they go to check the phone real quick. Even if they put it away for that half second, your heart sinks a little
Yeah,
bit.
you feel a little slighted. It's just like, I'm not that. I mean, is that a little bit more important than me? Even though you
Right.
just checked for a second, you still feel a little bit.
And you know that person isn't, downgrading you per se, but it is that thing. That's what I made. That's where I made that decision. Okay, when I am connecting with a person, I'm not going to let that other thing, because if it's someone else calling, then I can address that, but I will address that after I'm done with the person in front of me. It's I think it's a Japanese, I don't know if it's Shinto, but the most important person in your life is that person directly in front of you.
That's awesome. I never heard that before.
And I'm not saying it's
Because you're right in front of me right now.
and you're gorgeous.
I appreciate that.
But there is some beauty to it, and it doesn't mean that a wife or a parent or anyone else is second, but in that moment, you give everything you have to that person in front of you, and you get something back out of it. That's the irony of it, all of this. As I said, when I went through that really tough period a couple years ago, the amount of people that reached out to me was baffling, quite honestly. I couldn't believe how people were reaching out to me, but that's what you get back when you put that out there.
Yeah.
There are some people that go through rough patches and nobody knocks at the door.
True. That is very true. But I think with you, like number one thing that Kanye has been saying lately, I'll just preface that, is lead with love. Like, you're a very genuine person. Like, you're very bubbly. Like, you enjoy having conversations with people. Like, you don't mind sharing things with people. Like, when you're friends with someone or you talk to someone, you're all in. You're not going to be like, oh, I don't have enough time for you. Or like, oh, I got to go somewhere really quick. Like, you're going to stay and wait until the conversation's completely over with and be like, okay, let me get going to where I have to go.
And that's to the point too, though. You get something out of that yourself, because if you're genuine, you're going to get genuine back from other people. And people are fascinating. The most boring person in the world is fascinating. And it, again, as cliche as it is to say this, everyone does have a story to tell. Sure. The hard part is telling it well, but everyone has something fascinating that's happened in their life. And it's always interesting to find out about those journeys that people have had, where they've traveled, where they're going. It's my favorite question whenever I meet somebody new is, where are you in 10 years? If you ask somebody like who's going into school, oh, what are you going to do, once you graduate, or what do you want to major in? If something's in the near future, a lot of times people will talk themselves out of it. It's like, well, I want to go to med school, but that's going to take this much time. That's going to cost this money. And before the end of the sentence, they've talked themselves out of it, or they're doubting it.
True.
But if you say, where are you in 10 years, it allows them to project forward to, like, I'm living in London. I'm on the Thames River, and I'm working with children with disabilities or something. That, I think, is your true self. That's where, what you get to with people when you are being genuine. And the funny thing is, a lot of the secrets that we hide aren't worth hiding.
I agree.
I mean, unless it's criminal.
Yeah.
But, if it's a fight you've had or a situation where you've messed up, I've always found that, and this was another piece of advice that I've gotten from my dad, is that if you ever don't know something, no matter how obvious it is, don't be afraid to ask, because you may look stupid, but you look so much more stupid when you perpetuate it.
Yep.
and then eventually get caught. So if you mess up, you own it. And I've often found that when I've messed up and I say to people, oh, I did this thing, it was stupid, I'm sorry, most often an attack does not come out of that.
I think it's something with just saying sorry.
Yeah.
I think that's just what it is. A lot of people don't say sorry. Everyone's just like, oh, yeah, I messed up, my bad.
Or the unsorry, the I'm sorry if that offends you.
Yeah. It's like no one can genuinely say, like, you made a mistake. Like, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. Is there any way that I can fix it?
And you know, and that's exactly that's all you can do. It's something I always say to people is that well, something already didn't happen. Like when they're saying, "Oh, should have, should have, should have," well, that already didn't happen. You can only go forward.
Yep.
So if you did make a mistake, you own it, and you rectify it going forward. You don't go back in a time machine and rectify it. And so, being genuine and being honest really serves yourself. Quite honestly, it's not in a selfish way, but it truly does serve you.
It does. I want to go back one sec, like a little bit, just kind of like speaking things into existence. Do you feel like you can speak things into existence, or is it kind of like the best, like a mix of two, like speaking things into existence, but also taking action on those things as well?
I would say that the truth lies in both. Everything comes from an idea. You have to have the idea. And I think that if you truly have an idea or a desire, and it's a really positive thing, that it's not a selfish thing. If something is truly good, it's good for everybody.
Yeah.
And what I have found that often happens for me is that if I knew as a child I wanted to do children's books. I didn't have a plan B. Didn't even think about ever having a plan B. It's just like, yeah, I have to do this. I want to do this.
That's awesome.
But then I find the magic usually comes in once you let go of it. When you're trying to force it, like, okay, I'm going to go in here, I'm going to get this book deal, especially when you're young, because, college costs a lot of money.
Yeah, too much.
And then you get out of college, and a lot of times people are doing the same job they were doing in college. And you're looking for that first bite, that first chance, that corner you're going to turn where it's all going to appear for you. And so often I found it's usually in the second that I let go of, it's like I call it fishing. You cast it out there and then you let it go. It'll come to you. You cast it and then you just keep fishing, but you don't try to make it happen. But you have to be in the game. The other analogy I always tell young artists is don't worry about the touchdown, just be in the game.
Okay.
Because if you're worried about the touchdown, you're going to miss the interception, you're going to miss 4 field goals.
Yep.
Just be in the game. And I found with my art career, I'm not the best. I think I'm good at what I do, but I know I'm not the best in the world at it. But I'm very passionate, and it comes from something inside that, I want to express. And so I just put it out there. And my biggest book deals I've gotten have usually been ones that I didn't know the day before were coming. It wasn't
sweet.
It wasn't the agent calling, said, "Oh, I'm working on this deal with Penguin Publishing," or blah 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 blah. It could be, I can send out 1,000 portfolios and nothing will come in. It's usually I'm just sitting there, petting my dog, and my favorite story is when I did the pop-up book that it's now on display in the Smithsonian, which is still weird to me.
That is insane. I did not know that. Wow.
I have a couple copies left. I can show you sometime, but
yeah, definitely.
I remember saying to my friend, who ended up being the art director, he was working on a project for someone, and they were trying to think of something dynamic they could do. And I was painting something else at the time, and it hit me, oh, they should do a pop-up book. And I called my buddy and said, hey, next time you guys do your thing, you guys should do a pop-up book, because that would be a first, and that would be... And he just laughed and hung up the phone. And then he called me back later on that day and said, do you want to do a pop-up book? Because he went to the publisher and he said, hey, got this idea. Now, in all fairness, he said that they had actually jogged the idea around before.
Okay.
But in sharing that with him, I wasn't like, you should do a pop-up book and you should call me to do it. It's like, wow, you know what? You guys did a really good job last year. You did this thing. Maybe you could do this year. That'd be really cool. And he's like, oh, okay, thanks. And then you forget about it. You just let it sit.
Yep. And
it's just like if you've ever liked a person, not even liked them in a romantic sense, but if you like someone, if you come off like, hey, now
It's too much.
That's
much.
not
Yeah.
attractive. But if you're genuine, you put it out there and then you let it be. You let come what will come. That's when the biggest stuff comes. I feel.
I agree with that. How many books have you done so far?
I have illustrated roughly 40. It's, and I say roughly because, just like when you run a race, after it's done, you go to the next race. My measure of success as a young man was how many books, how much do you get paid, and blah, 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 blah. But life is a mountain. There's always more to climb. And the longer and longer I do it, the money, the amount doesn't matter. It's just like, what's the next challenge? What's the next challenge? So it's roughly been about 40. Of that, books usually only stay in print for about, 3 or 4 years maybe.
Okay.
I have maybe my 2 first children's books are still in print, so that's over 20 years ago. But I have about a half dozen to 10 that are in print right now.
Wow, that's pretty sweet. I didn't know books only stayed like in print for just a few years, but I guess it kind of makes sense.
Yeah, because every company, there's just tons of books coming out all the time, and now with digital, there's a lot of other stuff coming out. But books come back too. Other publishers will buy a book. But like I said, I don't typically concern myself with that. I do a book. Hopefully, I'm proud of it. And, it was actually, that was one of the funny things when everything happened a couple years ago. I had a little money saved up. When Jan became ill, called my publisher. I had 2 books waiting for me. And I said, I have to stop this for a second because I have to take care of something. And they were very understanding. And I had a few $1,000s in savings. And within 2 months, Jan didn't get better and she passed away. And in that time period, I blew through all my savings. And it was the day after she passed away, I realized I have $0 in the bank. Wow. There's no food in the house. I think I had a couple $100 in the bank still. And just like out of nowhere, royalty checks came in. Royalty checks are these magical checks you get.
They just appear.
They appear. They give you paperwork that says, oh, this is how much the book has earned, and it will arrive at. This is not a secret. No artist reads a contract.
Yeah.
None. No artist reads an 8-page letter-size contract. But I have been doing, these books long enough that, they generate money on their own. And this is not something that I ever really truly did for money. But it was just so beautiful that in that moment, there was $0 in the bank. I had these 2 books that would bring in maybe about $10,000 or so, but I hadn't done them yet.
Yeah.
And these checks came in the mail.
It's a weird way. It's weird how the universe works.
But it is perception, though.
Yep.
I do think it's perception because truly that was the most painful part of my life. But yet I never skipped a meal. I never was able not to pay a bill. I was never alone and I probably chose to be alone sometimes when I shouldn't have because, you just don't have the energy in those moments. But no, it's as hard as it was. I have nothing in my life that I could really ever complain about.
That's awesome. Speaking on just books and you having those 2 books kind of just like waiting for you, what is that creative process like? Is it more of, you get to read the book beforehand and kind of like feed get inspiration from, the book, or are you pulling from like real life events or things that have like happened to you and kind of like, like share that within the book?
Well, ideally, when you get a book, it does work if you have that basting time where you can get a book and read it and then put it away. Yeah. Because, your brain's still working on it. We've all had that where we're trying to remember someone's name. We can't remember it. And then a couple days later, it pops back because your brain's still working on it. And so I find if I read a story and then I let it sit, the pictures start to pop in on their own in my head. Now, deadlines, of course, are a factor. So
Yeah.
sometimes you have to speed up the creative process. But the beautiful thing about, you've heard the expression that all books are autobiographical. I think that's the same whether you're writing or illustrating the book. And it's something that I talk to children about when they say they want to be artists, because, you get so caught up that I want to be able to paint as a kid, it's like, I want to be able to paint really good. That's not that important. That's a technical feat. That's something that anyone can do. It's like a muscle, anyone can train and build that muscle if they want to. The important thing is to have something to say once you can paint. Because no matter how beautiful your painting is, if you've never seen a sunset or watched a flower bloom or something like that, your paintings will be realistic, but they'll be flat. So living your life and living, your life in whatever way that, that inspires you will come into your artwork. I don't think that I've ever done a book where a friend or a pet or someone doesn't come into the book at some point. And it's not even intentional half the time. I'll realize that, oh, that was my childhood bedroom. Because, you think bedroom. Okay.
Yeah.
The story might say, oh, Joey got up and got out of bed and went to the bathroom. And so in your head, you have a picture of a bedroom, and it's usually, I find that most people go back to their family home. It's like when you dream at night, we tend to all have a home that we dream of in our head.
That is so true.
And it usually is your childhood home.
Oh man, 80% of the dreams that I have where I'm like in a house are at the house.
Even
that
if
I grew
you're
up
the
with.
same age that you are now
Yep.
in the dream, and your life is the same, you're in your house.
Yep.
And that comes into your artworks, sometimes consciously, sometimes subconsciously. And I think that's a beautiful thing because it makes it more real, because it's coming from something real. And so I always try to be open to anything. The pop-up book that I did, I remember the art director had an idea. It was Mother Goose, and there was one page. It was the cat, hey diddle diddle, the cat and the fiddle, the cow jumped over the moon. And I remember I can paint a cow really well, but it looked weird. It just visually it looks weird for a cow to be jumping over a moon.
Yeah.
And I was telling my friend it's anatomically correct. It's a beautiful drawing, but it just looks too weird because it doesn't make any sense for a cow to be jumping over a moon. And he said, well, why don't you put it in a rocket ship? And my first reaction to him was, well, cows don't get in rocket ships. But then I realized it's a poem about a cow jumping over a moon. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So, you want to be open to that. Some ideas come just like that. There's a book that I wrote recently. It's not published yet. When Jan was sick, it was hard to paint because painting, it's not a lot of setup, but, you get the paints out, you start painting. You need a good couple hours to get things going. And I would often have to stop to help her with something. So it was hard to get painting in during the day. But what I took that time, creatively, what I found that I could do in that time was I could write. And I had always written like little ideas for kids' books so I'm 48 now. And I've been kind of collecting stories in the back of my head since my early 20s. But I started writing them down. And one of the best stories that I ever came up with came out within, like, I would say, a half hour. The first line came to me, and then after I wrote down the first line, the second line just automatically, well, this is where it goes.
Just started flowing.
Yeah, and I think it was Bob Dylan, I forget, was being asked by another artist who asked him how he wrote the song. It was so perfect. And he said, it just starts coming. And when those moments happen where it starts coming, you let it out.
Yeah.
You don't stop and go get a drink or sleep on it. You let it out. And a story is a painting. Any of them are living things. They tell you where they want to go. A relationship is a living thing. When you're in trouble.
Be way before you get yelled
Yeah,
at.
you just like, you get that. You
Yep.
just know that there's a flow to it. And just like I always say that people are I tend not to get mad at other people. I tend not to. Because I see everyone as actors in a play. That's their role. And so it's the same in a story. The characters will tell you where they want to go. If you're illustrating a book and a scene is set up, it'll tell you where the TV goes in the room, where the dog is laying in the room. It tells you, and that comes from living. But again, you have to be open to it as well.
Yeah. How do you deal with? Do you ever run into like creative block? Is that what it's called? Where you just kind of like can't think. I mean, like
I'm laughing.
Little thing about me, because I used to make music back in the day when I was like 17, 18 years old, and you will get that 5-6 songs in, and it's like, okay, I'm rolling. This sounds good. I like it, and then it's like the first line, and you're like, you just don't know what to say or like know what to do. You're just like frozen.
Yeah, you can't force it.
No,
you can't force it. I have found that the two things for me that help, and in my line of work, it is a business in that because a publisher will give you a bunch of money and they want you to give them something in a certain amount of time. What I find when those moments hit, even if it takes a little bit of time, it's best to step away for a second, because forcing it isn't going to make it happen. One of my biggest creative outlets is I go for walks with my dog. The later at night, the better. And I'll just go outside and walk when there's no one else on the street, and I'll have a conversation out loud with myself, not like at room volume.
Not like walking down the street screaming at yourself.
But just loud enough so that I can hear it. And I'll talk through it. And there's something that happens, I find, for me at least creatively, that it's like when you're proofreading your own paper, you don't see your own mistake.
Yep.
But I find that if I say it out loud, if I walk through the problem on a page that I'm trying to illustrate, and I say it out loud to myself, and it's quiet around, you can hear it like, oh, so obvious. It's like, oh, no, this goes here. That doesn't go there.
Yeah.
And, there's a belief that I hold, there's always a way. There is always a way.
True.
It's, to quote Captain Kirk, there's no such thing as a no-win scenario. There's a way to always make a painting work. There's a way to always make a poem work. If you're in a relationship and you're going through a hard point, if both people are willing, there's a way to make it work.
Yeah. It's like bend but don't break.
Yeah. Now, there are some times where you should let go of an idea.
Yep.
And you usually get that voice inside that, no. But again, even though as I test it, I try to work through, is this just a different kind of a challenge? But no, you kind of know when something's not you.
Yeah.
And, but as a creative person, I'm always interested in that moment where you can make it work. The greatest benefit to art college was not, I'm not putting my college down. It's a very good college. Maiad, it's here in town. But I always tell people, Maiad did not make me a better painter or a drawer or anything else. What it did was, the expression tunnel vision, where you just see.
Yep.
What it did was it expanded my vision a little bit. And then for each preceding year after college, you expanded more and more. You learn how to do it yourself. We would sit and critique after we'd get some assignment that everyone hated. And be 20 of us in the class, and the assignment might be to make something big, but the trick was that we could only work on a small piece of paper. And everyone would groan, this is impossible, this is stupid. And then we'd go home and work on it, and then critique day would come up, and we'd put up our little pieces of paper, whatever it was. And most people would have missed it, But one or two people would always have found a way to make it work. And at first, those people usually get attacked right away. Like, no, that's not right. And then you kind of say, well, wait, they did do it. And in those moments, it expanded your vision to what's possible.
Yes.
And that's where I think, like I said, anyone is an artist. Expand your vision, expand your opportunities. you know this in track. I don't know if it was Johnson, but it could have been Johnson. Was it Ben Johnson? He thought he was going to be a 100-yard guy.
Yeah.
And it turns out, no, you're totally a 200-yard guy.
Oh, Mike, not
Was it Michael?
Michael Johnson was, I think
200 and 400?
Yeah, it was a 200, 400 guy. Yeah. But I think it's like reverse. I think it was like he wanted to be a 100-meter guy. They made him a 2-4 guy. He always ran fours, but he wanted to like go down to the 1. But then Usain Bolt was like a straight 400-meter runner his entire life. And then they made him a 100-meter runner, and then he broke the world record like his second race.
Yeah. But see, that's the perfect thing, though. It's like that's you want to be open to.
Yep.
And neither one of them were doing anything really different than what they want. They wanted to run. That was the big. They wanted to run. They just thought that, oh, I was a 400. No, you're 100.
Yep.
And some people will fight that change and fight because no, in their head they have to be. There's no loss in that for anybody.
I agree. And even with society standards today, like for us, just like millennials growing up, we have this pressure on us to, once you get out of college, you got to buy a house, you got to get married, you got to have kids.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's a lot of pressure on us.
And no debt.
Yeah. And have no debt whatsoever. Like school didn't cost $80,000 for, 4 years and 2 years of grad school. Like, I think it's just how you got to bend but don't break. You have to realize what's best for you long term and put everyone else's standards and what everyone else thinks behind you and do what's best for you.
And people often do it out of love.
Yeah.
They want you to have these things, but so often we're projecting what?
Ourselves.
And people usually don't realize it, but, oh, no, you should have a kid. You should do this right away. It's like, well, my dad, I think I would not have traded him for any father in the world. And he wouldn't mind me telling you this. He passed away about 10 years ago, but smoking and drinking were his vices.
Yeah.
And he went through a really rough patch in his life at one point, and that's where the drinking took off. But this was a man that, I never had to fear. A man that I knew that I always came first, even though he had these things that he was dealing with. That he was someone I could always trust and that I always loved. And I remember it was not too long before he died. I think it was in my 30s. I was in my 30s at this point. And he was always really proud of me being an artist and so happy that I was doing it. But I remember he gave me like this little talk about like, well, you had a good run now, so maybe it's time to put the paints away and get a real job. And I told him, it's like, no, there's no other plan.
Yeah.
I mean, if something comes it doesn't come and I have to do something at some point, that's different. But no, there's this internal thing that I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And him saying that to me was coming out of a place of love. I think he knew that he was getting tired and he wanted to make sure his kids were okay. And making a living, as an artist is like, he would feel better if I were, working in an office somewhere, doing whatever. But, the irony, and I don't want to be over positive, but one of the freedoms that you have as a millennial, and it's a gift, but it is a darker gift. My dad, he was the last of the generation where out of high school, you could get a job at a factory, you could get a pension, get paid, $20 an hour to put stickers on beer bottles.
Yeah, that's what my grandma did. She put stickers on lawnmowers until she retired.
Yeah, and it's not to diminish that, but yeah, it's now you go to college, you go to grad school, you have all this debt, you get your first job in your line of work, and you may be making $30,000 a year.
Oh yeah,
and
that's true.
And it's it's not the same thing, but one of the gifts of that is that you aren't tied to a job because you're getting that pension and you know what I mean? It's like, no, so if something tickles your fancy and it's like, it isn't doing it for you here, then you go to the other place. You can follow that because you're not tied down to, my dad worked at Miller Brewery. He loved He liked it. I won't say he loved it. He liked it because it provided for his family. But he wasn't happy there. It was just a paycheck.
Yeah.
So nowadays, you have to fight and work so hard to get to do what you want to do. That's all you have to focus on.
True. I do have to say one thing about what you just said. Just honestly, just doing what you love. You have to fight so hard to do it. One thing for me, I kind of went through that struggle and like that journey. Like right out of college, I took a job making $29,000 a year because I had to figure out how to pay rent.
Oh my God, it was almost 30,000 exactly.
Not even 30. Like, yeah, they couldn't give me 30. It was like 29.8. And I'm just like, okay, I got to do what I got to do. Yeah. And I was miserable. And this entire time, like, just like honestly searching, like figuring out what exactly I wanted to do with my life. I was going to grad school, working full time. I was coaching at a high school, and I was coaching like for a USA team in the summer. And one day I was just like, I was sitting at work and I'm like, I'm not going to do this anymore. Like I'm done. Like I'm not going to sit at this desk anymore. And I was going to California for like a week for USA Nationals or something along those lines. And on a Friday, I gave him my 2-week notice, but I'm like, I'm not going to be here for the next 2 weeks. And I figured it out. At that point, I was just like, hey, like, let me try this coaching thing. Let me just see if this is something I want to do. Sent out over 100 emails to just coaches being like, hey, I will work for free. You don't have to pay me. Yeah. I just want to like see if this is something I want to do. Just like straight up. Like I want to see if this is, worth my life. It's something I want to do long term. And I got the opportunity to do it. I did it for 2 years. I enjoyed the heck out of it. But also during that time, I found out, hey, this is definitely not what I want to do for the rest of my life. Yeah. And it's like I had job offers as well. After those 2 years from like some pretty prestigious universities, and I turned them down. I'm just like, I tried this. I love it with all my heart. I love coaching track and field. It is amazing at the college level. But you know what? I don't envision myself living this lifestyle until I'm 50 years old.
And in those moments, that it's not a failure because it's still a step forward.
Yeah.
Because you know that.
True.
You're not guessing or wondering what if. And you did it. When you did it, you gave your all.
Yeah.
You were, as we said, present. You're present in it. You're doing it. And you're like, okay, now I can make that decision. I don't need this.
Yep.
How many people, though, do that?
Not a lot. Not a lot of people do it. A lot of people just go straight out of college, get this job that they hate, but it pays, $45,000, $50,000 a year, and they suck it up, and they're just like, they live for the weekends.
Yeah, and and for my dad, that was enough. It was enough for him to paid for the house. He sent my mom to college, and he just work was just zoned out. He did it.
Yep.
And that was fine because he lived for his kids on the weekends. He lived for that. But I won't say the company. I'll say the company. I won't say the guy's name. I had a manager when I worked at Kinko's. I worked at Kinko's third shift when I was in college. And the manager was a lawyer by trade.
Okay.
He went to law school. And law school is not like a 2-week seminar.
No. It's like that's another 4 years of your life after undergrad.
And he was assistant manager, and then the manager left and he got promoted to manager. And the saddest thing for me was that I didn't feel that he liked even doing it. But it was like, wow, I'm manager now. And I don't recall if I said it to his face, but I remember thinking, but you're a lawyer. I mean, there was something in you that said, I'm going to go to school for 8 years because I want to do this thing. And this job that you were doing while you were in school ends up becoming your career. And I get the logic, though, that follows because, he had a family.
Yeah.
And he's getting insurance and now he's manager. But that $29,000, $30,000 a year job.
Is it worth your sanity?
Yeah.
Is it worth it? No.
I
don't think so.
Now, with my career, like I said, money was never something that I factored into it. and I've been fortunate that I've done okay because it is a tough career, but I think that's the saddest thing, that you only get to live this life once, and if you're not doing something worthwhile, I think it doesn't just hurt you. I think it's bad for society. I think it's, bad for your family. When dad comes home and he's in a good mood because, he's fulfilled, he's going to give that to his family.
Yep.
And you're not doing yourself or others a service if you're doing that job that you're just like, no,
This isn't it.
This isn't it. And it's not selfish. Now, if you did it for a week and you're like, give it time.
Yeah.
But if you truly knew that you were a singer, and that's a field that has a lot of rejection, but that voice keeps telling you, just one more door, knock on one more door, knock on one more door. I think you have to listen to it till that voice isn't there anymore.
Yeah.
And just like when you did that, you did it, and then after a couple of years, you're like, okay,
it's not right.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it to death. I coach high school again. Like, I'll always coach, but doing that for the rest of my life, bouncing from one state to another, zero job security, something changed in the athletic department, everyone's gone. Like, not even like, the stability and all that. That's awesome. That's what I mean, personally, that's a big thing for me, is just having some sort of stability. And with that, there's no stability. You have a bad season, you're gone. Something
and
happens,
stability
you're gone.
is an important part of happiness. I haven't studied it fully. There's a Japanese word. I think it's akagi.
Okay.
It's a way of living for happiness. Living a happy life. And part of that they do factor into that. And this is Eastern culture. But I was surprised because it openly says, security, economic, whatever resource, having some security. Because if you're worried about, I have friends who work at UWM, and every year, I forget what kind of employee they call it, but you essentially get rehired every year.
Oh, like an adjunct,
Yeah.
or like
or you don't get hired.
Yeah, I think that's adjunct.
That's a hell of a way to live.
Yeah.
And I know people will say, well, that's how it is now. And it's like, well, there is a job out there then for you. There is a calling out there for you where you can have that. I don't think it's too much to ask.
No.
That if you're good at what you do and there's a value in society for it, you should be rewarded for that.
Yeah. Now everything's like hire at will or by will employment or something like that, where they can just fire you without like an excuse or like
at will.
At will. They'll just be like, yeah, today's your last day. It's like, I didn't do anything wrong. Well, I don't
and that's
tell
the
you
irony.
why, but today's your last day.
And that's the kicker. It does not measure how good you are at what you're doing.
No, not one bit.
If they can see that, well, we could hire this guy right out of college and pay him $5 less than
They're
on
going
paper.
to do that.
Yeah,
Most definitely.
yeah.
That's like the thing with the education system now is a lot of teachers are leaving. Like, they're quitting because they're, getting paid the same $30,000, $35,000 a year that the teachers who are now making, $70,000, $80,000 a year started at the same rate 30 years ago.
Yeah.
Like, there's no room for like inflation. Like, $30,000 a year does not get you what you can get $30,000 a year could get you.
And you
10
have
years
student
ago.
loans now.
And yeah, now we have student loans too, like on top of that, which is a whole nother thing.
It was like 50, not even 50 years ago. When I was a kid, you had, I remember my mom was going to UWM. My dad paid for her tuition.
Nice.
But I remember just like walking around the campus as a little kid, which you totally couldn't do anymore nowadays. Just let like a 6-year-old walk around a college campus for 2 hours while mom was in class. But students were really nice. They would talk to you because you're a little kid. And, a lot of them were waiters or waitresses or whatever they would do. And that was enough to pay tuition and rent.
Yep.
And you might have one roommate.
Yeah. One.
It's not, the economics aren't like they used to be in that way. You can do that now. You could have one roommate and work as a waiter or waitress, but your student is going to be debt.
Yeah. My friend that lives in New York now, he was saying that he pays $1,000 a month, and he has 3 roommates, and he says he lives in a box.
Yeah.
Like of course, it's New York, but
Yeah, but still, that's
$1,000 a month to live in a box. Like, man, that's insane.
well, and it goes to that point. So you better find what you love then.
True.
If that's the price you're paying,
Yeah.
don't sell yourself short.
Yeah. That was his dream. That was he always saw himself in New York. So, respect. I get it. You got to live your truth.
And even if that ends up not being the road you follow, I still feel that it's worthwhile.
Oh, definitely.
And I don't say this, I was very fortunate. I think it was I graduated in 93. I got my first picture book in the late 90s. And one of the great resources of youth is strength. Just unapologetic strength. You can go without sleep.
Yeah, you can. You can tough it out.
It's like asking someone out. You can take rejection and just keep on going. And from the point that I graduated into the late 90s, that's what I did. I knocked on doors. I went to every publisher that I could get to physically, or contact, write them or do whatever. And I got some pretty hard rejections. And it was something that was emotionally difficult, but I always for myself, the little trick that I always use, and again, I used this when I was in track too, is just telling myself just one more step. I was not a distance runner. And if we had to run a mile, right away, I had already talked myself out. I was like, I can't do a mile. But what I would tell myself is just another 5 yards, and then you can stop if you want.
One foot in front of the other.
Yeah.
Get there.
And then after that, you're like, okay, just 5 more yards. You can stop if you want. And it just took some of the anxiety out of it. So when I was knocking on doors with these publishers and trying to get through, it's like, okay, I'm just tomorrow. Tomorrow I'm going to send out a couple more, and then that's it. And then the next day, and it allows you to carry that, that burden as you go forward. Because like you said, if you're living in a box and you're paying $1,000 a month, and that's where you want to be, hold out as long as you can.
Yep, I agree.
And if it doesn't work out, at least you're not sitting in the place where like the what if. The what ifs are the worst. I won't share this on the podcast because I still know her name. There was a girl that I didn't ask out in high school. And she's a wonderful person, but I was intimidated to ask her out. And I was just hoping that she would know that that I liked her and that she would ask me out. Mm-hmm. And prom was coming up, and I remember it's just the perfect analogy. This really stuck, but this was the greatest lesson I had in high school. It was the day after prom. We were in gym class, and I found out that she had went to prom with a guy as a friend. And I just said, all of a sudden, since prom was over, the stress was off about asking her out because it already had come and gone. And I said, oh, I heard you went to prom. She's like, oh, yeah. I said, oh, did you have a good time? She's like, oh, yeah, I went with so-and-so. I was like, yeah. And for whatever reason, it was just easier to say now, like, well, I was going to ask you out.
Yeah.
And she gave me this look of sorrow and surprise and said, why didn't you? And I had nothing to say back.
You miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
Yeah.
That's just what it is.
And I was in the same situation. I didn't ask her out, and I didn't get to go out.
Yep.
And so had I asked her out and she said no, I wouldn't have gone out, but I would be in the same place. But it was so much worse because she would have said yes.
It's fear. Like, you shouldn't be afraid. Like, unless you're going to do something crazy, then it makes sense. Yeah. But it's like everyday situations.
You know those moments.
Yeah.
You know when it's something that's crazy. But if there's that thing, and it could simply just be asking someone out. It could be, I know for a lot of my friends who are artists, it was something, I don't want to say standing up to their parents. But parents of a lot of my friends in the arts, not even most of them, but some of my friends got pushed back. Like, especially if the parents were paying for it. I'm not paying for an art degree, was what they would tell them. And certainly at that age, I felt that was unfair, that if you're opting to pay for my education and it's my future, then you're doing that it's a gift.
Yeah.
You're doing that because you want to give it. You don't get to shape the direction of the gift. But a lot of my friends, I know one friend in particular, she allowed her parents to shift her from that direction. And it's like, no, because you're not really getting ahead. If they shift you into something that you're not passionate about it, that takes away from your life.
True.
That takes away from your relationship with them, because then there's animosity. And, that's, like I said, there is something to be had from the fight.
True.
Even if you lose. It's advice that I've so often given to friends. Even if you're going to lose, and again, this isn't for your parents. You don't do this to your parents, but even if you're going to lose a fight, you break their nose, because you make there be you stand up for that. If it's really in you, you fight for it. Even if you're going to lose, you fight as many days as you can. And that's how I did with my art, is that I really wanted to do this. I really wanted to get better at it. I could take the critiques. When I remember one editor looking at my portfolio over the phone, and I could hear she was eating. She was crunching on potato chips or something. And I could tell she wasn't really paying attention, but she said, "Your stuff is weak." And I wasn't offended by that, because whether your work is really strong or not, everyone sees it differently.
Yeah.
But if it was truly weak, I wanted to know why. So I asked her, well, what could I do to make it better? And she paused, and she's like, no, I don't know. It's just weak. But even in something like that, that's a win, because it's another piece of the puzzle. It's more information. And sometimes people will be wrong. This. People will look at you and make a judgment about who you are, what you are. They know your whole backstory before they even know you. But you have to be true to who you are.
True. I agree.
And if you can do that, and whatever you do, that's already a victory. I mean, I get stopped. I remember one of my favorite stories is I got stopped walking my dog by the police, and I was told that I couldn't be in the park. And I remember my first reaction was to apologize, and I realized I'm not in the park. And secondly, I realized, why can't I walk in the park? And so the next day I made it a point to walk that same route again with my dog, not because I was looking for trouble, but, you don't surrender those things.
Yeah.
If you know something's wrong, you stand up for it. If you know that I have to paint, then you paint. And even if no one looks at it, but that voice is telling you to do it, it behooves us all to listen to that voice. And again, success, I don't measure success by the money, by the awards. I've been lucky that I've won some awards. I hope my publishers aren't listening. I don't know the names of the awards.
There's some, though.
There's some. Because it's not like the Oscars. You don't get called onto a stage.
Yeah.
Your publisher says, "Oh, your book won the,
XYZ,
award." Oh, cool. And you might get a certificate in the mail,
Yeah.
or if you pay $70, they'll print or not print. They'll give you a bronze cast, and then you just move on to the next project, because the reward is in doing it. Physical awards, I see them more as a symbol that, okay, I'm touching people. This is doing something good. That's wonderful. But, that's not the fuel behind it. And I wouldn't trade any day of my life. There have been really good days. There have been really bad days. But I get to illustrate children's books.
Can't beat that.
When I'm talking to my buddies and they've had a bad day at work, it's like, I ran out of dark red and I had to use a slightly lighter red. It's
Some good problems to have.
yeah, it's like you can't complain about that.
Yeah. I appreciate you doing this. That was super insightful. Every single thing you said was super insightful. Yeah, I ended here. I always ask this, do you have any questions for me?
Well,
Or
actually, anything
that we didn't get to that you would like to speak about?
I will say one thing, and I'm not being cryptic or vague, but you will know what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something that I begin every day and every evening with. When I get up and when I go to bed, I always just say thank you. Because even in the worst days, there's something good that's come out of it. You know, I can stand up.
True.
You know, my dad died at 57. I'm just under a decade away from that. And I'm already living a healthier life than he's lived. I lost a lot of things a couple years ago, but I'm building my house. I'm having a son. I'm married. And so it's easier to give thanks than to not, because I'm lucky to get to do this. And so I always make it a point, like I said, when I go to bed and when I get up, to say thank you. But whenever I see people who have been an influence or putting good things out there, I have always made it a point that I never want to be guilty of not saying thank you to someone. And, you know, ever since I've known you, you've been very sincere.
Thank you.
And when I went through that a couple of years ago and I was rattling my brain, I'm trying to figure out what the next step forward was. I reached out to you at one point, and it wasn't even like within the first sentence, you're like, I'm there. And so saying thank you is a small thing, but it's quite possibly the greatest thing you can do. And I would urge everyone out there, because people don't do it on purpose. But when I was a waiter, I remember that you could get everything right 99% of the time. People would be happy. They'd eat their meal and they'd leave. That 1%, they'd always let you know. They'll always let you know.
Yep.
And it gives you a false perception of reality. So I know that in my life, I always try to make it clear to anyone that has been there in a positive way in my life to say thank you. And I thank you for this and for everything that you're putting out there.
I thank you for doing this. I greatly appreciate it. And everything you've done for me in the past, too.
You're very welcome. I do hope you'll put on a couple pounds, though, because it's like, geez. It's like,
that'll be next. Give me a few more years. Awesome.